I remember it all like it happened yesterday. It's crazy how quickly life can flip from being this perfect dream to a complete and utter nightmare. Rebecca and I were that couple, you know? The ones everyone looked at and said, I wish I had what they have. Met her at a party my buddy dragged me to, and man, the way her eyes locked on mine, it was like I was the only guy in the room. We clicked right away, same interests, same goals. She was the ambitious one, already a manager at some software firm, and I was hustling as a designer at a small studio, trying to make a name for myself. We were building our lives together, side by side. It felt good, like we were this unstoppable team. For years, things were honestly perfect. We did everything together, traveled to new places, had those lazy movie nights, hosted parties with our friends. She was my partner in crime, my best friend, and it seemed like nothing could mess that up. But if life has taught me anything, it's that things can go to hell fast and without warning. Everything started to shift after she heard about those layoffs at her company. At first, she acted like it was no big deal, brushing it off with that confident smile of hers, saying she'd land something better in no time. But I could tell she was shaken up, even if she didn't want to admit it. The Rebecca I knew, who was always so driven, started pulling away. She wasn't talking to me as much, spending more time locked away in her thoughts. She went from being this open book to a closed one, pages stuck together, and I had no clue how to get through to her. I tried to be the supportive husband, doing everything I could to cheer her up. I told her it was just a rough patch, that she'd bounce back like she always did. I was there, right by her side, but she wasn't hearing it. The spark in her eyes started to fade. Instead of those easy conversations we used to have over dinner, it was like pulling teeth just to get her to tell me about her day. Then the rejection started piling up. Every email she opened and every call she didn't get seemed to chip away at her confidence. It wasn't long before she started drinking more than usual. It started off harmless, just an extra glass of wine after dinner to take the edge off. But soon, it turned into her downing half a bottle just to get through the night. I told her, babe, maybe we should talk to someone, maybe even look into rehab if it's getting this bad. But she shot that down faster than I could finish my sentence. I don't need any fucking rehab, she'd snap, like I was accusing her of being some washed-up alcoholic. The drinking was bad enough, but then Carly came into the picture. God, I hated that woman. Carly was one of those friends who were only there to drag you into their mess. She was a party girl, plain and simple. She thrived on chaos, and it was like she had Rebecca on a leash, leading her into that pit of clubs and late-night drinking. At first, I convinced myself that maybe it was good for Rebecca to get out, to unwind. Hell, if blowing off some steam meant she'd come back to me happier, then I could deal with it. But it went from once in a while to Rebecca being out 3-4 nights a week, stumbling back home wasted, barely able to string a sentence together. One night stands out in particular. I got home late after pulling a double shift, and there she was, stumbling around our living room, completely smashed. I tried to help her get to the couch, but she pushed me away, laughing hysterically like I was the joke of the century. Where the hell have you been? I asked her. She just shrugged, slurring, out with Carly. Stop being such a fucking buzzkill, Courtney. That's when I knew, deep down, that something was really broken between us. But I was still holding on to this stupid idea that I could fix it. Looking back, I was an idiot. I should have seen it coming. But I didn't want to believe that the woman I loved, the one I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, was slipping away. I kept making excuses for her, thinking that once she got a new job, things would go back to the way they were. I kept telling myself that this was just a rough patch, that we'd come out stronger on the other side. But I was wrong. So wrong. I tried to be patient, I really did. But if I thought things were bad before, they were about to take a nosedive into a whole new level of hell. It was like every effort I made to reach out to Rebecca was pushing her further away. At first, I blamed it on the job loss and the booze. I told myself it was just her way of coping. But then Michael entered the picture. That asshole. I'd heard his name before. Michael was this guy she used to work with, one of those douchebags who thought he was God's gift to women. The dude was always flirting with Rebecca, even back when we were solid. But I never thought she'd actually entertain his bullshit. I mean, I trusted her. Or at least, I wanted to. But then she started spending more time with him. At first, it was just the occasional text or a coffee meetup she'd casually mention in passing. Oh, Michael and I grabbed lunch today. He's been really supportive, she'd say. Yeah, right? Supported my ass. But I let it slide. I was trying not to be that controlling husband who freaks out every time his wife talks to another guy. But when her Instagram started filling up with pictures of the two of them, smiling, laughing, arms draped around each other like they were starring in some fucking rom-com, my gut was screaming at me that something was up. So, yeah, I did something I never thought I'd do. I started checking her phone. It's not like I'm proud of it, but when you're backed into a corner, you start doing things that cross lines you never thought you would. I'd wait until she passed out drunk or left it unattended. It started with just her texts, but then I ended up going through her DMs, her Facebook messages, hell, anything I could find. And that's where I found it. Flirty messages with Michael, little inside jokes, the kind of shit that you don't just send to a friend. The text had this tone that made my stomach turn. Things like, last night was fun, we should do it again, winky face, and can't stop thinking about you. I'm not an idiot. I knew what those messages meant. They weren't just grabbing coffee or talking about their careers. And it wasn't just texts. I dug deeper into her Facebook account, and that's when I found the photos. Her and Michael at some party, faces way too close, hands in places that sure as hell weren't appropriate for a friend. I was livid, shaking with rage, but at the same time, I was crushed. I felt like a goddamn fool for not seeing it sooner. I confronted her one night. She'd just gotten home, drunk again, reeking of some cheap perfume that definitely wasn't hers. I cornered her in the living room, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to just scream at her. What the fuck is going on with you and Michael? I demanded. She had this look on her face, that smug, dismissive look she'd perfected lately, like I was just being paranoid. You're being ridiculous, she shot back, rolling her eyes. We're just friends, Courtney. Stop acting like some jealous psycho. But her eyes, man, her eyes were telling me a different story. She wouldn't hold my gaze. She kept shifting around, crossing her arms like she was trying to shield herself. I pressed her, tried to get her to admit something, anything, but she kept denying it, acting like I was a crazy one. You're losing your mind, Courtney. There's nothing going on. Maybe you should see a therapist if you're this paranoid. That was her go-to move lately, turning it back on me, making it seem like I was the one with the problem. It pissed me off to no end, but I was so tired. Tired of the fights, tired of trying to fix things that were clearly broken beyond repair. So, I let it go. At least, I pretended to. But the drinking and her behavior just got worse. She started hanging out with an even shadier crowd. It was like Michael was just the tip of the iceberg. Suddenly, there were all these new people in her life, people I'd never heard of. I'd come home, and there'd be strangers in our living room, drinking and laughing like it was some frat house. And Rebecca, she was right there with them, acting like she didn't have a husband sitting at home wondering where the hell his wife went. The more I tried to talk to her, the more she pushed me away. Why are you so fucking obsessed with controlling me? She'd yell when I tried to bring up her drinking or the fact that she was out till 3 a.m. with people who were obviously bad news. She was treating me like I was some overbearing dad instead of her husband who just wanted to make sure she was okay. It was like she wanted me to leave her alone so she could destroy herself in peace. The worst part? I still cared. I still loved her, even as she was ripping my heart out. I kept thinking if I could just get through to her, maybe we could fix things. But it was becoming clearer by the day that the Rebecca I married was gone, replaced by this cold, bitter, self-destructive stranger who seemed hell-bent on ruining everything good in her life and mine. There were nights I'd sit in our bedroom, listening to her stumble and drunk, or worse, not come home at all. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was with Michael or some other guy, wondering what the hell I did to deserve this. But no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I begged her to get help, to come back to me, she just kept slipping further away. I was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, there was no coming back from this. I don't know what possessed me to check her social media that day. Maybe I was looking for proof that I wasn't crazy. Or maybe I just needed confirmation that I wasn't the fool she kept making me out to be. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I found. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the same spot where we used to have breakfast together back when things were good, when we were normal. I don't know why, but I decided to open up her Instagram. She was sloppy with her privacy settings, so I could still see some of her stuff. I figured I'd find more of those stupid selfies with her new friends, maybe a few flirty comments from Michael. But this time, it was much worse. There she was in a set of photos that made my stomach churn. Rebecca, the woman I had spent years of my life with, the woman I had tried so desperately to save, was standing next to this scruffy-looking guy, the kind you'd avoid on the street. At first, I thought it was just another one of her wild, drunken nights out, but as I kept scrolling, my heart sank further. There were photos of her wrapped around him, her eyes glazed over, clearly not in her right mind. But then, the captions told an even uglier story. Things like having fun and making some extra cash, winky face, and Rebecca's wild side. The more I looked, the worse it got. One photo showed her practically draped over him, her clothes disheveled, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. The implication was clear, and my mind filled in the rest. I sat there, my hands shaking, ball rising in my throat. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out and stomped on it. She had sunk so low, so fast. I couldn't believe it. My wife, my Rebecca, reduced to this. My mind was racing, trying to come up with some kind of explanation. Maybe it was a sick joke. Maybe she'd lost a bet. But no. The look on her face, the way she was acting, she was fully aware of what she was doing. I called her right away, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. I don't even remember what I screamed at her. All I know is I was shaking with rage, demanding to know why. Why the hell would she do this? Was she that desperate for attention? Was she trying to hurt me? But when I finally got her on the line, she wasn't apologetic. She wasn't even embarrassed. She just laughed like I was the one overreacting. "Oh my God, Courtney, you're such a drama queen," she said, sounding more amused than anything else. "It was just some harmless fun. Chill out, seriously. I made a few bucks, so what?" I couldn't believe my ears. She was so casual about it, like she was talking about buying groceries, not humiliating herself and destroying whatever was left of our marriage. That's when it hit me. She didn't give a damn anymore. The person I once knew was long gone. All that was left was this shell of a woman who didn't care who she hurt as long as she could numb whatever pain she was feeling. I hung up the phone without another word. There was nothing left to say. I was done. I couldn't stay married to someone who would sink so low, someone who had no respect for herself or for me. I went straight to my laptop and filed for divorce. I didn't care how messy it would get, didn't care if it meant starting from scratch. I just needed her out of my life before I completely lost my mind. From that moment on, I was finished. There was no more trying to understand her, no more wondering if there was something I could have done differently. I was done playing the fool. And you know what? She didn't even put up a fight. She signed the papers faster than I expected, like she was just as ready to move on. People say that divorce feels like a death, that you grieve it like you'd grieve losing a loved one. But for me, it felt like cutting off a dead limb. There was no sadness, just a cold, hollow relief. Like I was finally free from a prison I didn't even realize I was in. I blocked her on everything after that. I didn't want to see her posts, didn't want to hear about her from our mutual friends. I just wanted to wipe her existence from my life. But no matter how hard I tried to push it out of my mind, the images wouldn't leave me. They played over and over, like a horror movie on repeat. It was over. Everything we had built, every promise we made, every moment we shared, it was all tainted, poisoned beyond repair. And that's when I realized maybe I was finally free. But those scars? They weren't going anywhere. Not anytime soon. After the divorce was finalized, I woke up the next morning, and it was like the air in the house had changed. Everything felt still. You know that eerie quiet that settles in after a storm? That was it. For the first time in months, there was no more yelling, no more walking on eggshells, no more trying to figure out what the hell Rebecca was going to do next. But it wasn't relief, not really. It was more like this hollow, suffocating emptiness that hit me the moment I realized I was alone. Like all those late nights of arguing and all the mess had at least kept me from thinking too much. Now all I had was silence. I stayed in that damn house longer than I should have. I don't know why. Maybe because selling it felt like admitting defeat, like I was letting her win. But every corner of that place was a reminder of her. The kitchen where we used to make breakfast together, the couch where we used to cuddle and watch movies, even the stupid plants she insisted on putting by the windows. It was like every object in that place was mocking me with memories of what used to be. And as much as I hated to admit it, part of me missed having someone around. The nights got longer, and the silence got louder. So one day, I made the decision. I put the house on the market, packed up my shit, and left. I moved to a different city, somewhere where no one knew me, no one knew what happened. I wanted a fresh start, somewhere I could try to forget everything. I found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just enough space for me and whatever was left of my sanity. I threw myself into work like a man possessed. I needed something to drown out the noise in my head, to keep me from falling back into that pit of regret and anger. But even with the new place and the distraction of work, it wasn't enough. That nagging emptiness never really went away. It was like this weight on my chest, pressing down on me whenever I tried to relax. I missed having someone to come home to, someone to talk to after a long day. And as much as I hated to admit it, a part of me still felt tied to Rebecca. I was angry, yeah, but the betrayal, it left a wound that wasn't healing as fast as I hoped. Then one day I met Emily. I was at a coffee shop, hunched over my laptop, trying to finish up some work. She came over to ask if she could share my table since the place was packed. At first, I was annoyed, just wanted to be left alone. But she had this easy smile that somehow broke through my wall. She introduced herself, said she worked at a nearby art gallery. She was different, warm, genuine, none of that guarded, manipulative vibe that Rebecca always had toward the end. We started talking, and it was like a breath of fresh air. I hadn't opened up to anyone in a long time, but with Emily, it just happened. We talked about everything: art, movies, our favorite places to eat in the city. I found myself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in what felt like years. And for those brief moments, I forgot about Rebecca, forgot about the mess she left behind. Emily and I started hanging out more, grabbing coffee, visiting art exhibits, just spending time together. I could feel myself softening around her, like she was slowly chipping away at the bitterness that had been eating at me. She was supportive, honest, easy to be around. None of that constant anxiety I had with Rebecca, none of the second-guessing. Emily was uncomplicated, and God, I needed that. But as much as I enjoyed being with her, there was always this part of me that couldn't fully let go. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for Emily to turn into another Rebecca. I didn't want to get hurt again. I couldn't handle another betrayal, another round of being made to feel like I was worthless. So I kept my guard up, even when I didn't want to. I couldn't help it. There were nights when I'd be lying in bed with Emily asleep next to me, and I'd be hit with this overwhelming wave of guilt. It was like Rebecca's ghost was still haunting me, taunting me. I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering if I even deserved to be happy again after everything that happened. Emily didn't deserve to deal with my baggage, but she stuck around anyway, patiently chipping away at the walls I had built. One evening, after we'd spent the day together at a local art fair, she asked me about the scars on my heart. I tried to brush it off, tell her it was all in the past, but she wasn't having it. She just looked at me with those kind, patient eyes and said, "Courtney, you can't move forward if you're still letting her control you." That hit hard. It was like she could see right through me. And for the first time, I started to realize that maybe she was right. Maybe I was still letting Rebecca's betrayal have too much power over me. Emily was here, right in front of me, offering me a chance at something real. But I was too damn scared to take it because I was still clinging to the hurt, still holding on to the bitterness like it was a shield. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. But for the first time, I actually wanted to try. Emily deserved better, and maybe I did too. I thought I was done with her, honestly. After the divorce, I was so sure that was the end of it. But life's funny that way, isn't it? Just when you think you've closed a door for good, it has a way of swinging right back open, slamming into your face. That's what happened with Rebecca. Even after everything, she found a way to drag herself back into my life, like some ghost that refused to rest in peace. After we split, I stopped trying to keep tabs on her. I didn't want to know what she was doing, who she was doing it with. As far as I was concerned, she was just another part of my past that I was better off forgetting. But every so often, I'd hear bits and pieces through mutual friends. Apparently, things had gone from bad to worse after the papers were signed. She had turned her casual drinking into a full-blown addiction. And the clubs? That was just the beginning. Word was she had graduated to harder substances, spending her nights in places that were best left forgotten. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself that she was no longer my problem. But every time someone mentioned her name, it was like a punch to the gut. No matter how much I hated her for what she did, a part of me still remembered the woman I married. The woman who used to laugh at my stupid jokes, who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during movie nights. That Rebecca was long gone, but I guess my heart hadn't completely gotten the memo. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from an old friend. It was one of those conversations where you can hear the bad news coming from a mile away, like the silence before a storm. "Courtney," he said, his voice hesitant. "I thought you should know. Rebecca's in the hospital. It's bad, man. Overdose." I don't even remember how I responded. I think I just hung up and stared at the wall for what felt like an eternity. I couldn't believe it. For all the shit she put me through, I never imagined it would get that bad. I mean, yeah, she was self-destructive, but this was different. This was rock bottom. I wrestled with myself for hours, trying to figure out if I should go see her. Part of me wanted to stay as far away from that mess as possible. She had made her bed, right? Why should I be the one to keep bailing her out? But another part of me, I don't know. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was that stupid hope that I could somehow fix her, even after all the damage. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't go, I'd regret it forever. So, I did what I promised myself I wouldn't do. I went. The hospital was cold and sterile, and the smell of antiseptic hit me the moment I walked in. The nurse at the desk gave me this look like she'd seen 100 people like me, ex-husbands who had no business showing up but came anyway, driven by some twisted sense of obligation. She pointed me down the hall, and my heart was pounding with every step I took. When I walked into her room, I almost didn't recognize her. She was hooked up to machines, her skin pale, eyes sunken, lips cracked. It was like looking at the ghost of the woman I used to know, the vibrant, confident Rebecca who used to light up every room she walked into was gone. This was just a shell, broken beyond recognition. She was barely conscious when I sat down next to her. For a moment, I thought about just leaving, slipping out before she woke up, but then her eyes fluttered open. She stared at me for a second, like she was trying to piece together who I was. Then came that bitterness, that familiar edge to her voice that made me realize nothing had really changed. "Why didn't you help me when I needed you?" she rasped, her voice barely more than a whisper. She looked at me with this accusatory glare, like I was the one who had abandoned her, like it was my fault she had ended up here. I just stared at her, numb. There was nothing left to say. We had been through this dance too many times before. "I tried, Rebecca," I said, my voice steady, surprising even myself. "I tried everything, but you didn't want to be saved. You pushed everyone away." She turned her head, refusing to meet my eyes, muttering something under her breath about how no one understood her, how the world had let her down. Not once did she acknowledge her own role in the mess she'd made. It was the same old story. Everyone else was to blame but her. I didn't stay long. There was no point. She was still the same Rebecca, still the same person who couldn't face her own demons without dragging everyone else down with her. As I walked out of that hospital room, I felt free, like I was finally letting go of the last thread that tied me to that toxic chapter of my life. When I got back home, Emily was waiting for me. She knew where I had been, and she didn't press me for details. She just wrapped her arms around me and let me breathe. It was one of those rare moments where I actually felt like everything might be okay. Emily was the complete opposite of Rebecca. She was patient, understanding, and most importantly, she didn't expect me to be perfect. But I won't lie, it was hard. Even after all the shit Rebecca put me through, a part of me couldn't help but feel guilty for walking away from her at her lowest. Emily would tell me over and over that I did what I could, that you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, but there was still this voice in the back of my head, whispering that maybe I could have done more. For the first time in a long while, though, I started to feel like I had a chance at happiness again. Emily was helping me see that the past didn't have to define me, that I didn't owe Rebecca any more of my life. And slowly, painfully, I began to believe it. After everything I went through, you'd think moving on would be the easy part. But even after the divorce was finalized and Rebecca was officially out of my life, there was still this lingering darkness that wouldn't let go. The memories, the betrayal, they had a way of clawing back into my mind when I least expected it. I'd be sitting at my desk, trying to focus on a project, and out of nowhere, I'd get hit with this flood of memories. Our fights, the secrets, all those nights she never came home. It was like my mind was refusing to let me move on. I tried everything to drown it out. I took on more work, more projects than I could handle, working late nights and early mornings. Anything to keep my mind busy. Emily was there, quietly supporting me, understanding in ways I didn't deserve. She never pushed, never demanded anything from me. But I could tell she was worried, that she could see the weight I was still carrying. Finally, she suggested we take a trip to get away from everything. "Let's just unplug for a bit, Courtney," she said one morning over coffee. "There's this little town by the coast I've heard about. It could be good for both of us." At first, I resisted. The thought of slowing down, stepping away from work, from my routines, it felt scary. But the truth was, I needed it. I needed something to break me out of the rut I'd been in since Rebecca's betrayal. We packed up and drove out to this coastal town that felt like it was a million miles away from everything. The moment we got there, I could feel something shift. The salty breeze, the sound of waves crashing against the rocks. It was like the world had slowed down, just for us. Emily had found this quaint little cottage right on the beach. Nothing fancy, just simple and cozy. She opened all the windows, letting the sea air fill every corner. "Come on," she said with that infectious smile of hers. "Let's explore." We spent the next few days just living in the moment, walking through the cobblestone streets, discovering hidden bookstores and quirky little shops. We'd eat fresh seafood at tiny beachside shacks, Emily teasing me whenever I tried something new. There were moments, small ones, where I could actually forget, where I could just be there, with her, without the shadows of my past creeping in. But it was that one evening on the beach that everything truly clicked for me. We decided to take a walk along the shore just as the sun was beginning to set. The sky was on fire with deep reds, purples, and golds, and the waves were glowing with the last light of the day. Emily had taken off her shoes, letting the sand squish between her toes, laughing as she dragged me along. I hadn't felt that light in years. We reached a secluded part of the beach, where the water met this little cove. The sound of the waves was hypnotic, and for a moment, I just stood there, staring out at the horizon. That's when it hit me, standing there with Emily by my side, the ocean stretching out endlessly in front of us. I realized I'd been living my life chained to the past. I've been holding on to anger and resentment like they were life rafts, thinking they were the only things keeping me afloat. But all they had really done was drag me deeper. I turned to Emily, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset, and kissed her. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a release, a letting go. For so long, I had let Rebecca's betrayal define me, had let her actions dictate how I saw myself. But here was this woman who had given me a second chance, who believed in me even when I couldn't believe in myself. In that moment, I felt something inside me shift. It was like this weight that had been crushing my chest for years was finally lifting. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to keep proving that I was over her. All I needed was to stop letting her have power over my life. The next few days, I felt lighter, freer than I had in years. Emily noticed it too. She'd catch me smiling to myself, lost in thought, and she'd just squeeze my hand, knowing exactly what was going on inside me without needing to ask. On our last night there, we sat on the porch of our little cottage, watching the stars come out. The sky was so clear you could see every constellation, and for the first time in what felt like forever, my mind was actually quiet. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder, and we just sat there, letting the peacefulness wash over us. I realized that, for the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. I wasn't holding on to the anger, the regret, the hurt. Rebecca's fate was her own, a path she had chosen, and I was done letting it poison me. I couldn't change what happened, couldn't save her from herself, but I could choose to move forward, to build something new with Emily. As we walked back inside, her laughter echoing in the cool night air, I realized I was finally free. The past was behind me, the future ahead, and for once, I wasn't scared to face it.